it comes to NFL content here on YouTube, draft grades are far from a new concept. There's plenty of people out there who will talk about their favorite drafts or their least favorite drafts. People that have a channel dedicated to a specific team will focus on that team's draft. There's guys out there, like I did last year, who will talk about the draft in its entirety, but break it down into 8 videos going division by division. There's other people who will just make one video talking about the draft at large and be done with it. All of those are very valid and, quite frankly, correct ways of going about this whole draft content thing. However, because I wanted to be different, back in the month of May, I decided that I was going to do one video for every single NFL team. 32 videos throughout the months of May and June, talking about the draft and grading every single pick. Here we are at the end of August, and I still have 2 whole divisions left to do. So that didn't work out, and I found out very quickly why I had seen no one else do this. Now, that being said, I made a commitment. I owe it to both myself and to you, the viewer, to complete this, to go through with these last 8 teams, these last 2 divisions, and hand out my grades for the 2024 NFL Draft. Now, that being said, because we are in late August, preseason has ended, cut day is either rapidly approaching or in the past by the time you're watching these videos, and we've seen camp and, the development that these rookies are already undergoing. Just know that that's not really factoring into these grades. Now, there have been a couple exceptions here and there. I make sure to disclose when those are, but for the most part, these grades were grades that I wrote down in, early May and have stuck to. Now, that being said, if there's a grade that is already showing signs of aging poorly, then I will tell you, hey, this is how I felt about this player before the draft. However, it looks like he's already starting to prove me wrong. I will happily admit that, and we can all laugh at me taking forever and being a big, dumb, stupid idiot. Also with that, please try to keep in mind that I'm not trying to say that I am better or know better than any of the GMs that get mentioned in these videos. I'm just a 21-year-old college kid who spent what little free time he had during the spring, taking a look at film and scouting prospects and doing what I could to the best of my ability. And I like sharing my opinions on this kind of stuff. You guys seem to like it when I share my opinion on this kind of stuff, so I'm going to continue to do it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the Seattle Seahawks and what they did during the 2024 NFL Draft. This was such an important offseason for the Seahawks, and I'm kind of sad I'm getting to them so late because I am really intrigued by this football team. I've wanted an excuse to really talk about them. This is obviously their first year post Pete Carroll. The first year in 14 years in which Pete Carroll is not the head coach. I know technically he still has a hand in football operations in some way or another. I think he's just a consultant or something of that nature. But either way, this isn't Pete's team anymore. This is John Schneider's team. This is Mike McDonald's team. This is a new era of Seattle football. This was already a really talented roster going into the offseason, and I think they've done a great job, especially here in the draft, kind of establishing this new era, this new regime. I know Schneider's been here for a little while, but this is the first draft where he doesn't have Pete in his ear, right? Because we know Pete had a big hand in everything. So this is the first year of Schneider being like, hey, this is my team. I'm going to draft the way I want to. And he knocked it out of the park, in my opinion. You can see the grades I handed out here, and, I'm recording this on cut day because I'm way behind on these videos. If you watch the intro, you know where we're at. But, taking a look at the picks here, there were 2 guys that I just didn't get around to, and Laumea? I really should have looked up how to say that before I started recording. I believe it's Laumea, and then Michael Jarrell out of Finlay. 2 guys I straight up didn't watch. They made the final 53. So, I'm not going to grade them in this video because I don't think that's fair for me to give an opinion on players that I've never watched play football. But if they made the final 53, that's saying something, right? It might be saying a little bit more about how bad the Seahawks interior offensive line is, but I digress. You got a D2 guy in the 6th round that made the team. That's impressive. Even one guy that didn't make the roster I really liked in DJ James. We'll talk about him. This was an awesome draft. And that started in the 1st round where they took Byron Murphy, the defensive lineman out of Texas, the 2nd defensive player off the board after Laiatu Latu. very much well-deserved. I loved Murphy, had an early first-round grade on him. In my opinion, was one of the 15 best players in this class. In fact, one of the 10 best players in this class. He was 10th on my big board. Thought he was an absolutely incredible player. And he is such a big deal for Mike Macdonald specifically because of what he was working with in Baltimore. Last year, we saw the Justin Madubuike breakout. Beaks came out and was the best pass rushing interior defensive lineman in the league. Had a ton of sacks, had a ton of pressures, made a lot of really big plays, played all across the defensive line, and just really helped that Ravens defense take that next step, right? They went from an elite defense to the best defense in football, and a big reason for that was Beaks having that big year. A lot of what makes Madubuike so good in terms of being a pass rusher can also be said about Byron Murphy. Are they the same player? No. But Murphy is going to give you what Beaks gave you in terms of just having this versatile defensive lineman that can do a little bit of everything and can do it at a high level. I absolutely love his game. People will look at the size, say 6 foot, 297 pounds. Who cares? That's a little man. Doesn't matter. He uses that to his goddamn advantage. There is no quit in this man whatsoever. He's one of the most aggressive interior defensive linemen I've had the pleasure of evaluating. He is the living embodiment of, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog, because this man has enough fight in him for this whole defense and then some. Taking a look at what he does well, he's an elite athlete. If you're little, you got to be quick. He's a hell of an athlete, has great speed, really good at accelerating, is really, really good lateral agility, which makes him somebody that's going to be a threat when it comes to shooting gaps. Super energetic player with a red-hot motor, like I said. Because he's short, he has that built-in leverage, and he knows how to use that to his advantage. He knows how to manipulate taller offensive linemen. His play strength borders on elite. He is way stronger than somebody his size should be. Lightning quick first step, lightning quick off the ball. He's very quick to diagnose an attack against the run. His quick feet and shed strength result in easy wins in run defense. Given his size, he has a surprisingly stout anchor against the run. And a big reason for that is this dead leg technique that he has perfected that he uses as extra ammunition, especially when he's getting double teams when his anchor starts to give out, to kind of reset himself and make sure he's not giving up ground, he's not getting pushed off the ball. He's really good at converting speed into power. He can do that at a high rate, really, really good bull rush. He's a great power rusher with a lethal rip move that borders on unblockable. He's somebody that, even though he looks small, and I know we saw some of it in the preseason of him just tearing shit up, he plays way bigger than he is. He plays way more aggressively than a lot of the guys on the field, and it's great. Now, I will say, not the perfect player. He's a little unhinged, which can be a good thing, but sometimes that will result in him playing with a little less than ideal discipline. He's not somebody that's ever going to be a true two-gapper because of his size, but you have Jonathan Hankins on the roster. You're not asking this dude to two-gap. I mean, for fuck's sakes, you run a 3-4. He's going to be playing a 4-eye in this defense. He's not going to be a traditional nose, so you don't have to worry about that. And his missed tackle rate is a little higher than you'd like to see. Missed 20% of tackles in 2023. I don't think that's something to get too worried about. And one of the big reasons for that is because I learned my lesson with getting obsessed with missed tackles or being unable to finish plays last year when it came to a draft prospect and Will Anderson. I don't know what his missed tackle rate was offhand, but I can remember watching him in Alabama, and there were a lot of plays where he'd get pressure and get in the backfield and miss a play, and then someone else would come in and clean up. And in my head, as the naive man I was, I was 20. I don't know why I was trying to say young boy. As the naive talent evaluator that I was, I looked at that and said, wow, he can't finish plays. Tyree Wilson's better. We saw how that worked out. Will Anderson won Defensive Rookie of the Year. Tyree Wilson, we don't know what he is. So I'm not making that mistake again, worrying about it with Murphy. It's something worth noting, but I don't think it'll be the end-all, be-all of his career or anything like that. I think he's a very, very talented ball player. I think he is somebody that's going to play a huge role in this defense. Him with Jonathan Hankins, as I mentioned, as your true nose tackle, and then Leonard Williams and a couple other guys in here like Jaron Reed and Mike Morris. That's an exciting defensive line. Like, that's a really, really nice group for Mike McDonald to be working with. There's a lot to get excited about with him. I think that was the perfect first-round pick for the Seattle Seahawks here. Could not have drawn it up any better myself. As we get into the third round, didn't have a second-round pick because of the Leonard Williams trade. They end up taking Christian Haynes, the guard out of UConn. Love this pick. Absolutely love this pick. He was my fourth highest rated interior lineman. Had a mid-second round grade on him. You get him here in the third round. I think that is incredible value. Reminds me a lot of Kevin Dotson, who Seahawks fans, you should probably be pretty familiar with, watching him with the Rams last year, having that big breakout after being with Pittsburgh. He's just somebody that has a really, really good power profile, really good length that allows him to consistently play outside of his frame. He's a great mover, especially when it comes to getting up to the second level and making plays on linebackers or DBs. He's awesome when it comes to blocking in space. He's very scheme diverse. He's somebody that he can play in a power scheme. He can play in a zone scheme. Whatever you need him to do, he's got it covered. He's a very, very good pass protector. Just all around, very few weaknesses in his game as a pass protector. Plays with the physicality and nasty demeanor you want out of a star guard. The type of guy that's going to get to the second level and want to erase the linebacker from existence, right? There's a lot of guys in this class who have the technique or have the power, but when they get to the second level, it's apparent they just want to do their job, which is fine. But me personally, I'd much rather have an offensive lineman that looks at that linebacker in the second level and says, lunchtime. Let's get him. Let's get him. Let's put him 6 feet under. But he's just got that physicality. He's got that demeanor. Very good at finishing blocks. That being said, you got to work on the hand placement a little bit. They can be a little wide at times. Sometimes he can be a little over aggressive with that initial punch. And his hips aren't oily. He had some hip tightness from time to time. But I think he is an incredible football player. He's got the experience. He's got everything you want day one, and I think he's still got upside. Granted, he is 24 as a rookie. But you take a look at the Seahawks interior offensive line. Honestly, I wouldn't be shocked to see him starting sooner rather than later. I think he's an incredible football player. He's somebody I have a lot of faith in. I think, again, this was a home run pick for the Seahawks. Could not have drawn this pick up any better myself. Last year, when it came to the Seahawks draft, I was begging them to take interior linemen. They did it this year. They get Haynes. Just an awesome, awesome football player. And then we get into the fourth round, and I owe Tyrese Knight an apology. Because, as you can see, as this little graphic popped up on your screen, I wasn't super high on him pre-draft. Right? I looked at Tyrese Knight as a bit of an unhinged player, somebody that just didn't do a whole lot for me, someone who I wasn't super, in love with in coverage. I watched 200 players. He was ranked 190 on my big board. Don't love that. Went back and watched the tape a little bit after the draft just to confirm my priors, pull together some notes for this video. Holy shit, was I wrong. This is a damn good ball player and one with a lot of upside. First of all, absolutely killed it at the FBS level. I know people will complain about lack of competition, whatever, and sometimes that's valid. But he led the nation in defensive stops last year. That doesn't just happen, right? He's an absolute tackle machine, somebody that has a sick nose for the ball, knows how to get to where the ball is going, how to get involved in every single play. Good enough athlete. In that short area, right up against the line of scrimmage, he's explosive. Great tackler, really good technique. He's instinctive against the run with great eye discipline. He's able to quickly process and slash into gaps. Takes really good angles to the ball. When he does drop in zone, which didn't happen a lot at UTEP, he did, show a little bit of awareness, show a little bit of instinct, showed that hey, I can at least hang, right? This isn't Matt Milano. This isn't some elite coverage backer, but he can hang. He's really good at triggering on screens as well. It goes along with his whole nose for the ball thing. That being said, he does have a tendency to wrap a little bit low. There are some questions regarding his ability in coverage, especially in man coverage because of those lack of reps. He needs to be a little bit more patient in coverage. At UTEP, he was very grabby when guys would come into his zone or the ball would be thrown his direction. He wasn't asked to blitz a whole lot. Not saying that's necessarily a negative. I think he has the physical profile to be a good blitzer. But in terms of taking on blocks and stuff, he wasn't somebody that I liked a lot to stack and shed. But to counteract that, he's really good at slipping off of blocks and avoiding that contact. You'd like to see him build up his ability to take on that contact a little bit better, but I digress, right? Like, he's got the stuff you want out of a developmental linebacker. 6 foot, 233 pounds, hard hitter, just an old school type of dude. Like I said, I really wish I could go back and change my pre-draft evaluation, like my grade and stuff on him, but we're so deep into this that I can't be flipping around my big board now. So I do regret a little bit that I think he would have ended up as one of my top 10 linebackers if I could go back and do it again. I was really, really impressed when I went back and watched him, and then watching him a little bit in the preseason, there was some stuff that stood out. He's just a good developmental linebacker, for what Mike McDonald's going to want, right? You look at this linebacker room here. You got Jerome Baker, who's a solid coverage backer. You've got Tyrell Dodson, who's made some plays. Like, I think Knight, starting out, is a really nice third linebacker for that room, but sooner rather than later, I think he can take over and improve himself as a starter. I will say, since we're talking about linebackers here, I'm really sad Michael Barrett didn't make the final 53. I was ecstatic when the Seahawks made that trade. I thought that was awesome for them. I loved Barrett coming out of Michigan. If you want to hear my thoughts on him, I'll give you the rundown, but if you want to hear my in-depth thoughts, I did do a top 10 linebackers video, and then also my Carolina Panthers draft grades video. I gushed about him. But, when I made this graphic last night, I had to remake it, for the video. Because of some of the cuts and whatnot. I did have an extra little trade Michael Barrett A++++++. I thought that was awesome because Barrett's just a really good team first linebacker. Not the most athletic guy in the world, but he's smart. He's really instinctive, really good downhill. You could tell at Michigan he was a team leader. You could tell his teammates had a lot of respect for him. He was the type of guy that would be the first one to help somebody up, first one in to help somebody celebrate. Just a really good, from what I could tell, seemed like a good locker room guy, good leader on the field. Obviously, he didn't have what it takes to make Seattle's final 53. That sucks. I would have liked to have seen him make it, because I think him and Knight could have been an awesome tandem long-term, down the line a little bit. Looking at their roster right now, Drake Thomas ended up being the other linebacker that they kept. I don't know a whole lot about him. Second season at NC State. If someone in the comments wants to let me know if Drake Thomas is anything, maybe he's some special teams demon. I've personally never heard of the guy. So that's ignorance on my part. That's not trying to throw him under the bus or anything. But regardless, Tyrese Knight, really solid pick, really fun developmental linebacker. I'm glad I went back and watched some of his tape and kind of reevaluated myself, because this would have been a much, much lower grade that really would have hurt the Seahawks end grade had I stuck with my gut reaction to watching Knight play. Then just a couple picks later, they end up taking A.J. Barner, the tight end out of Michigan. Great pickup here. You lose Will Dissly to the Chargers. You lose that true blocking tight end. That's what A.J. Barner is. Obviously made the final 53 for a reason. You put him in that room with Noah Fant, with Pharaoh Brown, with Brady Russell. I think that's a really solid tight end room. Just a really, really solid blocker. Like I said, good inline tight end. He's shown the ability to gain yardage after the catch with strength. It's really hard to bring him down. He's got a really, really solid frame. Somebody standing at a solid 6'6", 251 pounds. Just a really respectable build. A good upside in that regard. He's shown solid production, working the short area of the field, as a check down option. Can't hurt to have that, obviously. He flashed the ability to make difficult hands catches in traffic and through hits. Not something that's super consistent in his game, but there were definitely a few moments that stood out there. He had really solid pro day testing numbers, specifically his 3-cone and his broad jump stood out there. And he can win on the outside if you got to line him up out wide. I think he fits best as an inline tight end. Somebody kind of pretty much like a Will Dissly. That's the role I would imagine he's playing in Seattle. is just taking Disley's spot. I think he can absolutely do that. Didn't do great running the 40 at his pro day. Looking at the negatives here, ran a 4.8. It is what it is. I'm not going to get hung up on testing numbers. The Seahawks, their new head coach, knows damn well not to get hung up on testing numbers after what he got in Kyle Hamilton. He's not the smoothest mover, looks a little clunky, but again, he's an inline blocking tight end. You're not expecting him to go out there and beat Kelsey or Goddard or Pitts or, whatever. I don't know why Dallas Goedert was the second guy that came to mind. Mark Andrews, whatever smooth moving, athletic receiving tight end you can imagine. You're not expecting him to be that. More of a body catcher than you'd like to see, but again, those flashes of hands catching make me a little bit more optimistic that there is something to build upon there. Not the most productive guy in college, never reached 250 yards in a single season, but again, second string, maybe third string blocking tight end. Not something that's super, super concerning. I will say this is an A and not an A+, because I did think Cade Stover would have fit this role much, much better. He gives you a lot more as a pass catcher, a lot more as an actual threat. I like Noah Fant, but if you want to run that second tight end, which I know Shane Waldron's gone, now JSN's going to see the field a little bit more. The second tight end isn't as big of a deal, but that flexibility, it can never hurt. I really would have liked to have seen Cade Stover be the pick here. That's why this is an A, and that's why the Tyrese Knight pick was an A as well. There were a couple linebackers that I liked over him. But, in both cases, I still think you're getting a solid ball player that's going to do what you want them to do. Hence the A grade. Can't say anything too negative, obviously. And then we get into the 5th round, and they take Nehemiah Pritchett, the corner out of Auburn, one of 2 Auburn corners they selected. And I would say pretty comfortably the better player. I did not watch Pritchett pre-draft, but God, after I watched him post-draft, I was kicking myself. I really wish I could have just been preaching, singing my praises about this guy pre-draft, because I loved what I saw. Reminds me a lot of a guy like Rasul Douglas. Not a comp I came up with myself. Shout out to Marcus Whitman, that franchise guy. He was the one who really made that point, and I was like, yeah, that's when it clicked, right? Gotta love seeing a good comp out in the wild, and you're like, damn, wish I would have thought of that, right? But someone who's just a lot more instinctive and, reliant on football IQ as opposed to athleticism, which is totally fine. And that being said, Pritchett is more athletic than a guy like Rasul Douglas, definitely a lot quicker. But, he's not a super athlete. He's not somebody that you're going to match up on like a Tyreek Hill and press man coverage and say trail him all game, right? Not a lot of guys can do that to begin with, but that's an extreme example. That being said, good enough long speed. He's able to protect the deep ball pretty well. Great acceleration. He's someone with excellent route recognition, really able to, close in on routes. Played a lot of off zone at Auburn, so he was really good at closing in on routes quickly once he realized what was happening in front of him. Really good IQ in zone coverage. He's really good at, playing with his eyes to the quarterback, reading the quarterback. And there were even instances where he was mid-play being like, hey, this was like directing the guys around him to set up his teammates. That's awesome. Really, really good size and length, north of 6 feet, above average arm length, really good at getting his hands in the way of passing lanes. 4-year starter at Auburn. Really good at triggering downhill. He's going to try his ass off in the run. Might not be super effective because he is on the leaner side, but he's going to try his ass off. He's good as a tackler and as a blitzer. Very, very willing. Now, that being said, he is a little high-hipped, so he's not good at flipping his hips or changing directions. He's not the most agile guy in the world. Really struggled with missed tackles. Granted, he got better between 2022 and 2023, but going from a 23% missed tackle rate to a 17% missed tackle rate, not ideal. But he's a great fit in this type of defense. Somebody that I think could play inside or outside. Ideally, I would like to see him as the backup to Devon Witherspoon. And honestly, having a guy like Pritchett, I'm saying a backup, gives you a lot of flexibility with Spoon. because you look at what McDonald was doing in Baltimore with Kyle Hamilton, playing him at safety, at corner, at nickel corner, at linebacker, just putting him everywhere. Spoon is that guy for Seattle, right? Now, I don't know if you'll do it quite as much. Maybe you will. I don't know. We'll have to see. But Spoon has the capability to do that kind of stuff. So if you do have a play where you're playing Spoon as a deep safety, or you're playing him on the outside or in the box or whatever, Pritchett can step into that nickel role like right away. And I'm not saying play as good as Spoon, but hold his ground. Do what he needs to. And that's awesome to have. It gives you more flexibility with Spoon. I definitely think he was worth higher than a 5th round pick. Like I said, I didn't grade him before the draft, so I don't have like a exact range. I would have said he was probably worth like a 3rd round pick. So getting him here in the 5th is pretty good value. At least I would have said taking him in the early to mid 4th. But really, really good value there. Really good player. As you get into the 6th round, you got Satawa Lamea, the offensive lineman out of Utah. Again, as I said at the start of the video, didn't watch him pre-draft, so I don't have really anything to say here. Seeing him make the roster is great. I'm sure Seattle sees something in him. I'm not going to sit here and speak on somebody that I don't have any familiarity with. I'm not that type of person. So we'll have to see. Hopefully he can provide something, because that Seahawks offensive line definitely needs it. As we continue in the 6th round here, they take Pritchett's teammate DJ James, also out of Auburn. Someone that I did actually watch, my lowest graded corner, but I only watched 15 corners, still had a 4th round grade on him, so the value here is great. Unfortunately, he is the only pick out of this video to not make the roster. I would hope he's a practice squad candidate if he clears waivers. I admittedly haven't looked into it as much as I probably should have. Hopefully I'll throw something up in post. But, he's got the speed, he's a good accelerator, fluid hips, good in open space, really solid instincts, able to anticipate routes pretty early on in the play by recognizing and breaking on them quickly. He has a nose for the ball, good at breaking up passes, good hands, plays pretty smart against the run, and he rarely lets running backs get to the outside of him, which is pretty solid. But that being said, he is kind of an off-zone only corner. Not a lot of flexibility there. He's going to play his best football lined up 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. Not ideal at the NFL level. Really, really limited in terms of what he can do. Now, granted, he can do it well, but he's a lot like Emmanuel Forbes from last year's draft, where he's really good at one thing, but that one thing is kind of niche. So it's understandable why he got cut. I still think it was a good pick. Like, I think swinging him in the 6th round is good value. I look at this as a pick like, hey, this guy's got some talent. Let's see if we can't get him to bulk up a little bit or show some signs of wanting to bulk. And maybe that's still the long-term plan. He weighed in at 164 pounds preseason. I can't remember what he was at the combine. He was 175, so he was up 10 pounds. So, maybe you're hoping that long-term he can bulk up a little bit more, and that's what you're banking on. Maybe you want him on your practice squad for that. For that, I can see it. I think that would be solid. But I can understand not wanting him on the initial 53. And then finally, their last pick, they take Michael Jarrell, the offensive lineman out of Findlay. Never heard of this school before a day in my life. D2 school, from what I've been able to piece together. So, needless to say, I have not watched him play football. That being said, if you're a D2 offensive lineman and you made the initial 53 in your first year in the league, you're doing something right? Like, I can't say anything negative. Again, not giving it a grade because I'm not going to grade a player I have never watched step foot on a football field. But hey, a good pickup. There were no linemen here who I'm like kicking the Seahawks for not taking or anything like that. It's the 6th round. You took a flyer on a D2 guy you liked. He ended up showing you what you wanted. Good pick there. So as a whole, love what the Seahawks did. It's not apparent. First time I'm doing this, and I would imagine probably the only time, unless the AFC West absolutely blows me away, I'm giving a second team in the NFC West an A+. That is Seattle and San Francisco both getting an A+ for me, joining the likes of Chicago and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh in terms of having elite drafts. Absolutely knocked it out of the park. Again, maybe some guys I would have taken in the 4th round over Knight or Barner, but I still think they're damn good players. They're going to fill the role that you want them to fill. Murphy and Haynes are absolutely fantastic picks. Pritchett, I'm really excited to see what he's going to allow that Seahawks defense to do. James, if he makes it on the practice squad, we'll have to see long-term what the plan is there. But I think the Seahawks absolutely killed it. This is a hell of a way to say, hey, listen, we love Pete Carroll, but this is a new era of Seattle football. This is a new era of this front office. We're doing things a little bit differently. They absolutely knocked it out of the park. And I am very, very excited to follow the Seahawks this year because I think they are going to be an exciting team in spite of a scary offensive line, for lack of better words.
Had a chance on the throwback. This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder.
Wow. Using that